Michael Auslin is a fellow at the Hoover Institution and the author of The End of the Asian Century: War, Stagnation, and the Risks to the World's Most Dynamic Region. He joins us now from our Washington bureau. Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
In an op-ed in the LA Times, you wrote that if the U.S. was to strike a deal with China to intervene in North Korea, it would, quote, compromise American credibility in Asia and around the world. How so?
Well, I think what would be seen by most of our allies is that the United States not only had no answers to the North Korean problem, but also that we felt we had no choice but to go hat in hand to Beijing to try to get a solution. And if that was the case, then they would ask, well, what's the point of being allied with the United States? If it's very clear that China is the one that holds the cards, that has the influence and the power, then you might as well put your boat with China's. That's why I think the idea of a grand bargain, which would undoubtedly include withdrawing American troops from South Korea, is a very risky one. First of all, we'd probably have to do that as a precondition to China getting involved, and then there would be no assurance that they would even be able to have the influence with North Korea that they claim they have.
Well, early Wednesday morning, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson spoke with reporters about the president's warnings toward North Korea. Let's take a listen.
So I think what the president was doing is sending a strong message to North Korea in language that Kim Jong-un would understand, because he doesn't seem to understand diplomatic language. And I think the president just wanted to be clear to the North Korean regime that the U.S., unquestionable ability to defend itself, will defend itself and its allies. And I think it was important that he deliver that message to avoid any miscalculation on their part.
Could a threat from the U.S. be effective in this case?
Oh, I don't think so. We've threatened the North Koreans many times, maybe not in this type of language, but I think Kim Jong-un understands diplomatic language perfectly well. What he knows is that if he can get the U.S. back to the table, which is also what China wants, then he can just run the clock out on the Trump administration the same way that he ran the clock out on the Obama and Bush administrations. I don't think there's any doubt that Kim Jong-un knows that if he got into a full-fledged war with the United States, that there's almost no way that North Korea could win. What they want to do is to deter us. And so if you can target either the bulk of our forces on Guam, or more importantly, Los Angeles or Denver or Chicago, then their calculation is that the United States is going to be the one that blinks. So the more that we threaten to do things, the more that they're going to feel that if they can just put our homeland at risk, they really get the upper hand.
Well, as you know, Secretary Tillerson had been pushing for dialogue with Pyongyang, but are talks and negotiations now at a point where it is no longer feasible?
Well, I mean, I think that the North Koreans have told us over and over they're never going to give up these weapons. Now, that doesn't mean they wouldn't like to get us back to the table, because if they get us to the table, then it really is just a breather and more room for them to perfect this nuclear and ballistic missile program that they're building. But this is what failure over 25 years looks like. These are multiple U.S. administrations, Republican and Democratic alike. We have done nothing to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons. We've done nothing to isolate them from those who are helping them to get nuclear weapons, either through money or through direct technology. So the idea that we're suddenly going to be able to negotiate away these weapons is, I think it's a fantasy. Instead, we have to throw out the old playbook. We have to do two things at least right in the beginning. First, we have to acknowledge that North Korea is a nuclear weapons capable state. That's simply a fact and a reality now. And second, we have to think very clearly about what our deterrence doctrine is going to be, as well as our declaratory doctrine. Is it to defend only ourselves? Is it still to defend our allies? What are the red lines that we're not willing to accept? Because we have to get used to living in a world that has nuclear weapons from North Korea.
Michael, why do you think that Washington has been hesitant to acknowledge what you just said, your first point, the notion that North Korea is a nuclear weapons state?
Well, two reasons. First, you have to accept failure, which we don't want to do.
It would be an acknowledgement that U.S. policy in North Korea has failed. Absolutely.
I don't see how you can spin it any other way, but yes, that's what you'd have to acknowledge. And then secondly, what it would also do is help shred further the non-proliferation treaty and the non-proliferation regime. So that's why you can't actually declare North Korea a nuclear state, because that means it's signed up to certain provisions of the non-proliferation treaty. But the reality is they have the weapons, they have the missiles. The longer that we pretend, number one, that they don't, or number two, that we can denuclearize, it's just the farther we're getting away from a solution to this.
Right. Michael Auslin in Washington for us. Michael, thanks very much for your perspective.
Thank you.